what is a well-architected code base? What are the elements that they need to establish to make it that way?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of like the now most valuable skill in software engineering, which is to architect the code base such that making incremental changes to it is really easy and intuitive. But for example, there's for a web application, there are several parts of the code base. One will be the design, right? Like typically the design used to be handled with CSS. So you have these massive CSS files. So for example, I can show you in Gumroad's case, which is also open source, so people can follow along if they want. But if you look up our CSS files, you'll see that we have tons of CSS files that define the style of the application, right? And they all live within this, right? So the calendar, the car, the carousel, the cart, like they're all these things. This is a terrible way of building stuff today, because what it means is all of this code, to make a single change on gumroad.com, this code will be included on every single page, right? So if your code has if your page has a progress bar on it and you change the width to size 7 instead of size 5, that'll change the progress bar across all of Gumroad, right? So now you have to test every single page in which a progress bar shows up, right? So then you have to search for this specific thing, progress bar, search for it in the code base, and then update each one of these places and test it to make sure, like for example, here you're overriding the width of the progress, right? And the display. So you have to test, you can kind of notice in a lot of these places, the width is 0.75 EM. So maybe that should be the default, but there's no way the default is set to size 5. What is size 5? I don't know. It's coming from somewhere else in the code base that I have to go discover, right? So there are all these like misdirections where it's really hard to start to build out this thing. The new world of building things, we use Tailwind. If you go to Flexile, uses Tailwind. There is no CSS files. If you search for CSS, you only have a single CSS file in the entire thing, which basically just defines like the overall themes. And this way, the AI never has to think about what's the foreground color, what's the background color, what blue do we use, what red do we use. The entire design system literally basically is here. The visual design system is here. Like the font, the color, what else is there, right? Padding, there's not much else, right? And so sort of super, super easy to understand, like think about how much context is here, right? It's 181 lines of code and you can basically build stuff within Flexile. But if you wanted to understand the design system in Gumroad, all of a sudden you're not 100 lines of code, you're at like 100 files of which each one is going to have, lots of code. Like you go to one of these files, you have all of this code that you have to think about, right? And so, yeah, so sort of Tailwind, you can have this conversation with ChatGPT, like why is Tailwind better than global CSS for shipping features? By the way, nothing to do with AI, right? Like, and if you really want a much faster response, you can ask ChatGPT without Pro turned on. But anything that basically is good for humans is good for AI and vice versa. So Tailwind is good for shipping humans. It's just much more noticeable because the rate of speed increase with AI is much more, right? So if you make this change, and we basically, like, this is like the first step I tell everyone to do if they're moving to start to use AI more, like they need to delete their CSS.
Oh, wow.
You're not gonna be able to make these changes. So for example, like this addressed this, right? Like why was this so simple and easy? Let's see the code. The code was one file change, right? Because there are no CSS files, there's no CSS to change, right? So in the case, let's say we were using CSS, well, you have to change this file, which is the component, the equivalent of HTML. Then you have to change the CSS file, right? There would be an equivalent CSS file, right? Well, that CSS file is referenced from every single TSX file. So now you have to effectively, it's like as if you edited 300 files, right? So in this case, only one file. You only have to, and all the CSS changes are right here. Class name, flex, item center, gap one. All of these changes are, you want to make a button, but with this color, and you want to underline it on hover, and you want the text to be small, all here, And then reading this as a human, I can see all the changes. There's only one file, right? It's like infinitely simpler to work on. So that's one thing about architecting the code base. And you can actually see with Gumroad, we are leaving CSS behind, and we have a task open to migrate every single one of our CSS files and delete them all. So all these files will be deleted soon. And to sort of calculate that for you, let's see if I can open up this, find the file. So yeah, so like in this, I could just ask you, how many lines of code are all CSS files? Let's see what it does. Thousands of lines of code, right, will be deleted. So a huge amount, like a book's worth of content will be deleted. So all this and the number of bugs that can exist will like everything will improve. Some of this code may not even be used, and we don't even know.
Mm.
It's hard to say because it's all hidden in all these different files. 5,425 lines of code.
Crazy. I hope you enjoyed that short clip. You can check out the full episode here.